The Denver Broncos must do this if they want to have any chance of beating the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday. So, the Denver Broncos' 15-game losing streak against the Kansas City Chiefs has been well documented throughout the NFL. But another losing streak that the Denver Broncos are currently on the wrong side of that does not get talked about enough, in my opinion, is our 6-game losing streak to the Las Vegas Raiders. That is absolutely disgusting. The last time the Denver Broncos beat the Raiders was in 2019, the last game of the year. In fact, that was the last game that the Raiders were known as the Oakland Raiders. It was kind of a meme at the time. The last thing the Oakland Raiders ever did was lose to the Denver Broncos. Well, here we sit 3 years later, and now the Denver Broncos have never beaten the Las Vegas Raiders. And there are 3 reasons that I can attribute to that from the Raiders side of the football. And that is the play of Derek Carr, who fortunately is no longer there, Josh Jacobs, and Max Crosby. So, from the quarterback side of things, the Broncos, I feel like, have the leg up. Jimmy Garoppolo is prone to basically throw away games. Him stepping out of the back of the end zone last year when the San Francisco 49ers came to Denver is literally the play that ultimately decided the game. I'm confident that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to go out there and try his best to lose this game for the Raiders, quite frankly. That's just what Jimmy Garoppolo does. But even though Derek Carr's gone, I do strongly feel like it's going to be a tall ask to beat the Denver Broncos, and that's because Max Crosby and Josh Jacobs are still just absolute killers against the Denver Broncos. If we come over here, first we'll take a look at Josh Jacobs' stats against the Broncos. This is disgusting. Josh Jacobs, in 154 carries in 7 games against the Broncos, has 721 yards and has scored 9 touchdowns. So he averages over 100 yards per game against the Broncos. He averages 4.7 yards per carry and over a rushing touchdown average in each game that he plays against the Denver Broncos. That is horrible. The Denver Broncos simply cannot let that kind of production happen from Josh Jacobs if they have any chance at all to win this game. If we come and look at the 2 previous matchups for the team against the Las Vegas Raiders, week 4 of the 2022 season at Las Vegas, Jacobs went off 28 carries for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then in the second game at Denver, he still was really effective. 24 carries, 109 yards. This dude just consistently scores against the Broncos. He consistently rips off big runs against the Broncos. The Broncos have no answers when it comes to tackling Josh Jacobs, when it comes to clogging gaps to stop Josh Jacobs. It's just really been a complete crap show for the Denver Broncos whenever they have to go up against Josh Jacobs. And now that Jacobs is officially back with the Raiders, there was some talks about him potentially holding out to start the season after the Raiders placed a franchise tag on him. After last season, they declined his 5th-year option. So basically for 2 years in a row, the Raiders told Josh Jacobs, "We don't believe in you long term." And from a business perspective, that's probably the right move for the Raiders. But at the same time, when Josh Jacobs goes out there and leads the league in rushing, and the Raiders don't fairly compensate him for that, that's a problem. Now, the Raiders and Jacobs did have some sort of come-to-Jesus moment, and basically the Raiders gave him some extra money on his contract and will basically allow him to leave in free agency next year. So this year, and for the 2 games against the Broncos this year, in our Week 1 matchup and probably our Week 17 matchup, assuming that the Raiders aren't just completely out of the picture by then. Who knows, maybe Josh Jacobs will sit out at that point. But for sure for this game, we have to plan for Josh Jacobs, and we have to have a strong game plan to stop him. Sean Payton is not going to tolerate for us to get whooped in the trenches like that, because that's what this is a product of. We are getting absolutely manhandled up front by the Raiders offensive line. We can't have that. And this year, the Raiders offensive line has significantly regressed from last season, so I'm really hopeful that this Denver Broncos D-line, Zach Allen, I'm looking at you, Mike Purcell, I'm looking at you, Elijah Garcia, I'm looking at you, DJ Jones, I'm really looking at you. Those guys are going to need to earn their money in this game in order to slow down Josh Jacobs. And then at the second level, too, we need strong disciplined play out of our linebackers, Josie Jewell, Drew Sanders especially. I think Drew Sanders might get some extra looks in this game just to serve as basically a gap-clogging run stuffer to hopefully contain Josh Jacobs, and then Alex Singleton as well. So right now, the Denver Broncos are going to need to pour all of their resources into stopping Josh Jacobs, because I feel like our secondary can do a pretty good job against the Raiders' weapons. Darren Waller isn't there anymore, and at tight end they've got Michael Mayer, the rookie, and then they've got Austin Hooper as well. So I'm not overtly concerned about that. And then wide receiver wise, PS2, I feel like, has learned his lessons from his last time playing against Davante Adams. So I feel like he's going to do a much better job against Davante Adams than he did in our last matchup against the Raiders. And then on the other side, I'm really confident that Damari Mathis is going to be able to lock down Jacoby Myers. So that is something I'm pretty confident in. But when we move on to the other side of the ball, because it's not just Josh Jacobs that's been just an absolute monster against the Denver Broncos, it's been Max Crosby as well. Crosby's played in 8 games against the Broncos since being drafted by the Raiders back in 2019. He's got 25 solo tackles, 11 assists, and 11 and a half sacks. And if we come over here and look at Crosby's stats from his last 4 games against the Broncos, in 2021, in our first matchup with the Raiders, 3 sacks, 1 sack in that following game, and then 2 sacks in both matchups with the Raiders last year. So, I'm sorry, man. The Denver Broncos have got to do better in terms of pass protection as well, and that's something that I'm not particularly confident in with Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey. I'm worried that Max Crosby could have another big day against us. We're going to have to put Adam Troutman in there to chip, basically, on whatever side Max Crosby is rushing off of. But then the Raiders still have some other edge rushers that the Broncos are going to have to worry about in Chandler Jones, as well as first-round pick Tyree Wilson. I'm worried about the Denver Broncos offensive line matching up against the Raiders D-line. That's something we're going to further dive into in our game preview for this game later this week. But man, I'm really worried about what Max Crosby is going to do against us, but I am hopeful that we'll be able to at least slow down and contain Josh Jacobs with some of the new resources that we've added on defense. That's one thing that Sean Payton has looked at film and says, we need to find a way to stop Josh Jacobs. Sean Payton is a massive fan of Josh Jacobs. He talked about wanting to bring him to Denver whenever all of Jacobs' contract negotiations and disputes were going on with the Raiders. So I really feel like Sean Payton is going to have a strong plan to slow down Josh Jacobs, but I just don't know if we have the horses up front to stop Max Crosby. I really hope I'm wrong, but I definitely am worried about that. So at the end of the day, man, unless the Denver Broncos put all their resources in to stop Josh Jacobs and to stop Max Crosby, then they have no chance in hell to win this game against the Raiders, even if Jimmy Garoppolo goes out there and does his best effort to lose this game for them. All right, Broncos country, how do you guys feel about our outlook stopping Max Crosby and Josh Jacobs in this game? Again, I'm much more confident in us being able to stop Jacobs, but still, that's going to be a tall ask. But with Crosby, I'm really worried about what he's going to do to our offensive line, and then Chandler Jones and Tyree Wilson as well. But I'm curious about your thoughts on this Broncos country. Drop those comments down below. I would love to hear them as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe to the channel. And until next time, guys, this has been another episode of Denver Broncos Syndicate. I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.